Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News, and here are some of the top stories we've been following. Following Israeli airstrikes and the deaths of nearly 700 in Lebanon this week, the Israeli president vows to achieve total victory if Hamas does not surrender. Plus, a day after his first try failed, Conservative leader Poilievre issues a new non-confidence motion to bring down the Liberal government. And Hurricane Helene crashes into Florida's East Coast Friday as a Category 4 storm.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 2 people were killed and dozens injured after the Israeli military says it hit Hezbollah's central headquarters in Beirut. It's not yet confirmed whether Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah was among the dead, although 3 major Israeli TV channels are reporting he was the target of the strikes. An Israeli army spokesman says the strikes targeted the main Hezbollah headquarters that were located underneath residential buildings. This follows Lebanon's health ministry declaring that nearly 700 people have been killed by Israeli strikes in Lebanon this week. For his part, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his military will fight until it achieves, quote, total victory if Hamas does not surrender in Gaza. Netanyahu took to the United Nations General Assembly podium in New York today to defend his country's response to the October 7th Hamas attacks that triggered the devastating war in the Gaza Strip. Netanyahu told the UN that Israel will no longer tolerate rocket fire from the Lebanese terrorist group, saying, quote, enough is enough. Meanwhile, Canada and some of its allies have jointly called for a temporary ceasefire at the Israel-Lebanon border and called on Israel and Hamas to accept a ceasefire proposal in Gaza.
We still hope and expect that all parties will stop this violence and allow for a de-escalation. There are too many lives at stake, not just in Lebanon, not just in the region, but indeed broader around the world.
Tensions were high in the House of Commons late this week. A day after his first try failed, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has issued a new no-confidence motion to bring down the Liberal government during another inharmonious day in Parliament. Liberal House leader Karina Gould fired back, calling Poilievre desperate.
It's a little sad that the leader of the opposition, having just lost a vote of non-confidence in the government yesterday, is putting forward the exact same motion today. I think it shows his desperation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
No, in fact, the motion specifically demonstrates that this government, this NDP Liberal government, has doubled housing costs. I found it interesting that the NDP has now discovered that they doubled housing costs. A second ago, a Montreal MP stood up to point to a young woman, Pascal, who can no longer afford to rent, much less to own, after housing costs have tripled in that city. When I was housing minister, rent was $700 in Montreal, and we built almost 200,000 units. Mr. Speaker, why can't the NDP put their actions where their words are and vote for a carbon tax?
The sentencing for Marco van Hugenbos and 2 other men charged with mischief at the Coutts border blockade in 2022 have once again been delayed. In a virtual courtroom session on Friday, all parties agreed to delay until October 17th, citing Van Hugenbos's need to retain a new counsel. However, when Van Hugenbos spoke with BCN over the phone, he says he believes the earliest availability to move forward could be January.
The courts and all parties involved decided to get together quickly virtually just to see how I was proceeding with my with retaining new counsel. It's been quite the process since we were initially charged over 2 years ago. I don't know if this is normal. I think there is. I'm very aware that nothing happens in a speedy manner in our judiciary, but this is definitely a bit of an extreme as to the circumstances I'm currently in. But I mean, at this point, I have to transition. I have to run with it. It's unfortunate, but I guess I'm rolling with the punches. How I would say it.
Van Hugenbos, as well as Alex Van Herk and George Jansen, were found guilty of mischief over $5,000 in April for their roles at the Coot border blockade. The maximum sentence for the charge is 10 years. Well, Truth and Reconciliation Day is this Monday, September 30th, and ceremonies will take place across the country. Here in Alberta, the province will hold a commemoration ceremony in the Reconciliation Garden on the east lawn of the Alberta Legislature at 2 p.m. They are encouraging people to wear orange to show your support and commitment to reconciliation, as it's also Orange Shirt Day. The day also recognizes the ongoing intergenerational effects of residential schools and acknowledges that every child matters. The event at the legislature will feature Indigenous speakers who will share their perspectives on and experiences on reconciliation. The family of the Blood Tribe member who died while in the custody of Calgary police issued a statement to media through the Blood Tribe. 42-year-old John Wells was known as a champion rodeo participant, becoming a steer wrestling tour champion back in 2012. He previously served as the president of the Blood Tribe Ag Society. In a statement, his family says, quote, John was a loving father, son, grandson, brother, uncle, nephew, and friend to many. His dedication to his family and community was unwavering, and his impact on the youth he mentored was profound. On September 17th, police in Calgary were called to the Carriage House Inn on reports of a man causing a disturbance and refusing to leave the property. Officers say they attempted to de-escalate the situation. However, a struggle ensued, resulting in one officer pulling out a taser and another deploying pepper spray. Shortly after Wells was taken into custody, he went into medical distress and died at the scene despite efforts from EMS to revive him. The Alberta Serious Incident Response Team, or ASIRT, is continuing to investigate the incident and will release more details at a later date. Lethbridge police have charged a male and female in connection with a break-in at the downtown ice cream shop that occurred on a Monday. At 5:20 a.m. that morning, staff arrived at Cookie Crimes in downtown Lethbridge and discovered the front window had been smashed. Police investigation revealed the break-in occurred at approximately 1:30 a.m. after two subjects broke the glass and entered the store. Throughout the night, video surveillance recorded 8 more subjects entering the business through the broken window and steal property. And they stole property and ice cream valued at over $1,500. Damages to the business are estimated at $1,000. Kathy Marie Mills and Davy Clifford Weasel Moccasin, both of Lethbridge, have been charged with break and enter to commit theft. They were released from custody and scheduled to appear in court later this year. Well, the town of Coaldale has announced that the first phase of construction in their new cold food storage facility is complete. The recent phase saw site demolitions, general earthworks, and utility installations at the site completed. The facility will cost $222 million and finish at just under 30,000 square meters in size. Full completion of the site is expected in 2025. Rotary clubs across Alberta are gearing up to send an armada of fire trucks and ambulances and other public service vehicles to Mexico this weekend. The Los Amigos project tasks Rotary members to drive used public service vehicles to Mexico and communities where they lack emergency or educational services. The project, beginning in 2011, has trips annually and has since shipped over 60 vehicles to Mexico.
Back in 2011, the number of Rotarians from Lethbridge were down in Mazatlan or Mexico somewhere, and they seen that there was a need for school buses, and that's how this project actually started. And one of the first vehicles to go down was actually a school bus in 2011. They very quickly found out that there was a huge need down there for emergency services vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks, handicap vans. This year we have 8 vehicles going down, and the communities, they need these things. We put fire trucks in communities of 30, 40, 50,000 people. They don't have a fire service. We'll head off to Lethbridge to meet up with the other half of the team, and we'll do any last minute repairs and get ready to go.
All teams will gather at the Canadian Tire South in Lethbridge at 7 a.m. this Sunday before embarking on an approximately week-long trip to Mazatlan to distribute the vehicles. A pair of 9 and 10-year-old boys from Lethbridge had a scare in which one of them almost drowned and his best friend pulled him out of the water. Benjamin Nunez is now recognized as a community hero. BCN's Heidi Echeverria has the brave and cute story.
Benjamin and Carter, two little and big friends for about 7 years. Like many children, they think about playing and having new fun experiences. But on July 29, 2024, a moment of play almost turns into a tragic afternoon. This is Benjamin, and he explains what happened that Tuesday.
We were having a good day at the pool, and we started to play, and in the diving board, he tried to challenge himself to cross the pool in one breath, and he was starting to swim. And then I saw some bubbles come up, and then I started to go to the other side, wondering what happened. I saw him at the end there. He was there laying. For a second, I thought he was joking, but then I jumped in. I tried to tell somebody to help, and then they blew a whistle, and they started to do CPR and all that.
A Lethbridge firefighter, paramedic, and a lifeguard were attending the YMCA at that moment, and they supported the YMCA lifeguards.
My daughter and Dr. Derman's daughter are best friends, and they were swimming at the YMCA, so I went to work out. I saw the lifeguards pulling a lifeless body out of the water, so I jumped off the treadmill and ran down there as fast as I could. When I got to the deck, the lifeguards had already cleared everybody out of the pool and into the changing rooms and stuff. And I saw Ryan doing CPR. So I ran over to help him, asked for the AED, and just controlled the young gentleman's airway while Ryan was doing CPR.
I was one of the off-deck lifeguards at the time. I was out on deck doing a head count. When you're working at a pool, you're only as strong as your team. We all responded within, I would say, 30 seconds. Our pool was cleared very, very quickly to give us space to work. Again, I can't say enough good things about the Lethbridge YMCA team.
Carter had gone swimming to the YMCA with his friend Ben, and I actually wasn't there. They go swimming together all the time. They're both strong swimmers. So I was actually at home. I was chopping veggies. It was a Monday afternoon supper time. I was making supper, and I got a phone call from the Y. They were really quick at calling me to let me know that there had been an incident at the Y. They had to call an ambulance and perform CPR on Carter.
The ceremony ended with Carter putting the plaque on the survival wall. This place showcasing scenarios where community heroes have contributed to save a life, and this helps to recognize the chain of survival that a community needs to save a life. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echevarria.
Thank you, Heidi. Incredible story. Well, for the first time in history, Canadian war brides from the Second World War will be meeting together in Lethbridge. The Canadian War Brides and Families Association is anticipating the arrival of hundreds of women across Canada and all around the world this weekend. Lynn Martin, president of the Canadian War Brides and Families Association, says the aim of this gathering in Lethbridge is to educate the community about the history of the war brides and to tell the important contribution they made. She gives more information about the event.
Every year, the war brides meet in a different province. Last year, we were in Regina, Saskatchewan, and the year before in Halifax, Nova Scotia. This year, we chose Lethbridge. So the reunion starts today, Friday, and tonight we'll have a buffet banquet with a speaker. Tomorrow is our main gathering. We have 70 people coming for our banquet. We have dignitaries and speakers. 47,000 war brides came to Canada. They married soldiers from the Second World War, and they were accompanied by 24,000 children. It was the largest immigration Canada has seen. And what their contributions to Canada was. And I mean, we have a great many people that grandmothers or mothers were war brides, like famous politicians, writers, painters.
The event begins tonight at the Sandman Signature Hotel and continues tomorrow, which includes tours of the Lethbridge Military Museum and the Japanese Garden. Dr. Art Miki, a Canadian-Japanese activist, is in Lethbridge to promote his new memoir. Miki worked with the Canadian government to achieve the redress settlement for the internment of Japanese Canadians during World War II. Friday, the Nikayuko Bunka Center by the Japanese Garden presented the acknowledgement at the museum that former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney signed back in 1988.
There's quite a history of Japanese Canadians here, and it's similar to history in different places. I was actually moved to Manitoba to a sugar beet farm, so I can relate to the experiences they had here. And so I think it's good to share some of our stories with different people, especially the younger people who might not have remembered or knew about the past. And I think that's one of our obligations, is really to ensure that people don't forget what happened to Japanese Canadians so that things like that don't happen again.
Since the beginning, when the Bunka Center opened in 2022, one of the things we've been trying to do is to have the voices of Japanese Canadians within this center. The center has become a custodian of history as we try to, as Art said, make more visible these histories in really important ways. So having Art here, we're just absolutely over the moon that he is here giving a talk this evening at the Sandman to the community.
Dr. Miki is at the Signature Sandman Friday to present his memoir, where he shares his experiences of being forced from his home in British Columbia to Manitoba during his youth. He is working with Indigenous activist Phil Fontaine to achieve similar reparations for First Nations in Canada from their experiences in residential schools. Well-known award-winning British actress Maggie Smith has died at the age of 89. We hear more now in this report from the Associated Press.
Masterful, scene-stealing actor Dame Maggie Smith has died. She was 89. Smith was an Oscar award-winning actor who also won new fans in the 21st century in the Harry Potter films and as the Dowager Countess of Grantham in Downton Abbey. In a statement released Friday, her family say they're devastated by the loss of their extraordinary mother and grandmother. Smith was frequently rated the preeminent British actress of a generation, which included Vanessa Redgrave and Judi Dench. She was awarded the Best Actress Academy Award for The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie in 1969, as well as the British Academy Award, and picked up a Supporting Actress Oscar for California Suite in 1978.
In other news, Florida was hit with strong winds and flooding on Friday as Hurricane Helene crashed into the state's eastern coast as a Category 4 storm. The Lee County Sheriff's Office shared footage of communities bearing the brunt of the storm system, with a couple stranded near Fort Myers Beach needing to be rescued with boats. Wow, what a scary situation. Well, thankfully, we are not experiencing those wet, windy conditions here in southern Alberta. In fact, it's shaping up to be a beautiful weekend, and I'll be right back with the full weather picture following this short break. Beautiful looking day out there today, but it wasn't a hat day. Oh no, that's for sure. Not with those 70-kilometer-per-hour winds. We did reach a high of 25 degrees though. Now those winds should be dying down overnight, and then tomorrow, Saturday, looking at calm, sunny, high of 24 degrees. Should be fairly lovely. And then as we get into Sunday, also nice and warm, 23 for the high. Still higher than average for this time of year, which is of course 18. So on Monday we go down to 14 degrees, which is more seasonal. Sunshine, and 20 degrees on Tuesday, up to 16 for Wednesday and Thursday of next week. So like I was saying before, the average high for this time of year, 18 degrees, average low 3. Now on this day back in 1967, we had our record high, which was 32 degrees. -8 is where we were at back in 1928, which was our record low for this day. Sun rose this morning at 7:26, sunset this evening at 7:17, so we're seeing 3 minutes less daylight than we saw yesterday, so sitting at 11 hours, 51 minutes of daylight. On the west coast tomorrow, 16 for the high in Victoria. Now Victoria is seeing a bit of windy conditions, up to 40k winds, up to 60k in the Juan de Fuca though. 15 for the high in Vancouver with mainly cloudy skies. Sunshine across Alberta tomorrow, high 17 in Edmonton and 19 for the high in Calgary. Now as we see the rest of the prairies here, we are seeing mainly decent and sunny conditions, actually more than decent. 24 for the high in Saskatoon, 27 the high in Regina, up to 40k winds in both of those cities. 27 is the beautiful high tomorrow in Winnipeg, much higher than the seasonal average for this time of year. That is for sure. It's like summertime there in Winnipeg. Toronto sitting at 22 degrees, 30% chance of showers there, mix of sun and cloud in Ottawa with high of 23, 22 for the high in Montreal tomorrow with clear skies. Now, as we're seeing the west coast here, we're seeing shower conditions. So 30% chance of showers in Fredericton, particularly in the morning there. 20 degrees for the high, afternoon showers in Halifax, 19. 18 for the high in Charlottetown, 30% chance of showers, and we're seeing periods of drizzle waning out by noon in St. John's with a high of only 12 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast. The federal government's deficit has grown to $7.3 billion so far this fiscal year. The Finance Department says the deficit between April and July compares with a $1.2 billion deficit over the same period last year. The department says revenues increased by $14.9 billion during the 4-month period. Public debt charges rose by $4.2 billion due to higher interest rates. Stats Canada says the country's economy grew slightly in July, increasing 0.2%, following essentially no change in June. The growth in real GDP was helped by strength in the real trade sector, gaining 1%, retail trade sector that is, gaining 1%. Also driving that upward trend was the motor vehicles and parts dealers subsector, which gained 2.8%. Stats Canada early estimates for August suggest GDP was essentially unchanged, with increases in both oil and gas extraction and the public sector offset by decreases in manufacturing and transportation warehousing. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 77 points on the day to finish at 23,956. The Dow was up 137 points to 42,313. The S&P 500 was down 7 to 5738, and the Nasdaq was down 70 points to finish at 18,119. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 94 cents to 68.61 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 17 cents to 2.92 US. Gold was up 15.48 to 26.8220 US an ounce, and silver was down 43 cents to 31.91 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.75 per bushel. Barley is at $6.10. Canola is at $13.60, and corn is at $7.41 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.30 to $183.15. Feeder cattle were up 15 cents to $247.07. Lean hogs were up 90 cents to $87.33, all October contracts. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74 cents US.
Recapping one of our top stories, tensions were high in the House of Commons late this week, a day after his first try failed. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre issued a new no-confidence motion to bring down the Liberal government during another contentious day in Parliament. Liberal House Leader Karina Gould responded by calling Poilievre desperate. Coming up, as cooler temperatures approach, many Albertans are looking for ways to save money on their power bill. Nathan Neudorf, Alberta Minister of Affordability and Utilities, gives some advice on finding cheaper electricity rates. Catch the full interview after the break. And when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of our stories and interviews.
One of the biggest ongoing concerns for many Canadians is having a reliable and affordable power supply. Now, one potential solution that's getting a lot of attention around the world is hydrogen. Now, to chat about this in more detail is Nathan Neudorf, Alberta's Minister of Affordability and Utilities, joining us from Calgary. Welcome back to BCN, Nathan.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Al.
You bet. Now, first of all, can you share with our viewers a little bit about hydrogen, where it's found, and how it's produced?
Well, there's lots of avenues for hydrogen to be extracted from the atmosphere or different elements. In Alberta, our predominant method is through natural gas, which we have nearly 300 years of supply. So, but the technology in this area just continues to develop and evolve all over the place. We're really excited about its potential. We're working through some of the cost implications and transportation challenges, but it is a growing industry expected to be over $11 trillion worldwide. And Alberta is definitely a leader in its production and development.
So Nathan, what kinds of things can we use hydrogen fuel for? Can we use it to power vehicles, maybe use it in our homes or commercially?
All of the above. So right now, one of our railways, CP Rail, has a hydrogen locomotive that they've been developing for a little over a year and utilizing. That's a great advancement. The government of Alberta has actually signed an agreement to use some hydrogen cars. There is a fueling station at the airport in Edmonton, so it's great for that. We're looking at some new legislation and regulation to allow it to be blended for household use. And of course, it could be utilized for burning to create electricity with fewer emissions than even natural gas. So lots of application for the space and continually developing. We're really excited about its potential.
How long would it actually take to fill up a hydrogen vehicle?
Actually, I don't know that. I would imagine somewhere between a regular gas vehicle and less than an electric vehicle. So we're again, continually advancing the technology. These things are a little bit of a moving target right now, but the future is very, very bright.
How long do you think it'll actually take to set up the infrastructure? And one of the concerns about the EVs is we don't have the infrastructure right now in many parts of the country. So what about when it comes to hydrogen? How long would that take?
Again, that's an ongoing conversation. If we can build it on the back of our existing natural gas pipeline, which is extensive, then that timeline's really cut down in cost and time. If we have to build a new hydrogen, that's a different exploration. Again, technology is continuing to develop and advance. And these are the questions that we're seeking to work with industry to find the best, lowest cost solution for all Albertans.
So Nathan, why do you believe that our province is in a good position to become a global leader when it comes to hydrogen production?
Because we have so much technology from our oil and gas sector. They are global leaders already. And Alberta's production of hydrogen is over 2 million cubic tons per year already. The entire United States is just over 10 million. So we're a huge player globally. We have the technology, we have the resources, we continue to advance and stay at the forefront of a tremendously exciting new technology and growth industry.
Now, hydrogen obviously is a gas. How would you calm the fears of some of our viewers thinking, well, is this dangerous, working with hydrogen?
Of course, there's many of us older folks who remember the Hindenburg and some of those kind of things. Technology continues to advance. The temperature, as I understand it, the temperature of shipping, if it's very, very cold, much more stable, all of those kind of things. We continue to work with industry to make sure that we have the best, safest, lowest cost technology to make sure that these issues aren't feared or aren't dangerous to everybody where they're utilized.
Now, you touched a little bit earlier on some of the infrastructure here, Nathan. What kind of a timeline are you envisioning to maybe see proper infrastructure for fueling stations to be put into place to make hydrogen vehicles more practical?
I think that's continually evolving. It is very difficult to put a specific timeline because of the technological advancements. There's some already, there's many more proposed, but we have a private market and a private industry that provides that. So they're moving very, very quickly. And I think within the next few years, we'll just see that accelerate. So rather than put a specific date on it, we just know that it is advancing very rapidly.
And what about when it comes to the environment? How green is hydrogen fuel? To what degree does it really lower emissions?
There's many different colors. There's gray hydrogen, green hydrogen. Blue hydrogen is most specifically linked to natural gas, which is what we have. Green hydrogen, I think, would generally be seen as the most clean. We're continuing to work on that technology. There's actual chemical processes for converting natural gas to hydrogen to electricity, which don't require combustion. So in that aspect, even natural gas fuel source can be a green hydrogen, depending on the process. We're excited about all the technology and all the application for it. It's cleaner because it has fewer particles, and if you do a chemical process rather than combustion, you're not burning anything and you're not even creating that emission. So we can capture the pure carbon dioxide molecule. Lots of technology, lots of science. We're really excited about the potential and the leadership that our private industry has shown.
So you feel that Alberta can become a global leader when it comes to hydrogen. Nathan, how much demand is there really around the world for hydrogen fuel at this point in time?
Well, it's continually growing. Like I said earlier, it's expected to be over an $11 trillion market. We have a hydrogen roadmap. We have a hydrogen center for excellence, and we have funded over 100 individual projects to the tune of over hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that we are advancing this and we remain a global leader as it's adopted more and more worldwide.
Are there certain countries that have come knocking on Alberta's door looking for hydrogen?
Lots in Europe, lots in the Asian market, Japan, and South Korea, pardon me. The United States is a great trading partner. All around the world, they're coming here. We have some very exciting projects with Linde and with Dow Chemicals. Lots more on the go. We are on the world stage, certainly.
As you know, I mean, you're from this region here in southwestern Alberta. We're all about agriculture here. So what role do you envision hydrogen playing in the agricultural sector? How it could be a real game changer for our farmers and ranchers?
Certainly, our farmers and ranchers have to get their product to market, whether that's by road or rail. Hydrogen can be a fuel source to advance that with lower emissions. And who knows, one day we may even have tractors and combines that run on hydrogen fuel. Again, lower emitting, but still with the power that they need to function their equipment. It's just exciting to be part of it, and very proud that Alberta is a global leader in all of these aspects.
Now, you are the Affordability and Utilities Minister. I want to talk to you about my last electric bill. Dude, it's not coming down. Let's talk about the electricity grid. And you say the province is doing more to make electricity more affordable for Albertans, but I didn't see it in my last bill. Talk to me.
Well, when was the last time you talked to your competitive retailer on what program you're on? What package do you have? I'll tell you, my last bill in Edmonton went down by 5 times. I was $165 for July. I was $33 for August. So if you are looking at your rates, the competitive retailers are doing a great amount of work. The average price for the last 4 months in Alberta has been about 2 cents a kilowatt. And our default rate, the RRO, which is soon to be the R-roller, the rate of last resort, is down over 60% from last year alone. So I encourage you to go contact your provider and see what competitive markets you can find. The lower rates are there, and we're doing a lot more work this fall and into the new year to continue to provide that low cost and stable pricing for Albertans everywhere.
You know what? Yeah, I'm with ATCO right now, and I have to talk to them about the 12 cents per kilowatt hour that they're charging me right now.
I think you should. I think that's there's competitive rates much lower than that. I suspect you might be on that RRO rate. We'll continue to work with them on that, but check out what rate you're on. There's lots of options for you.
Now, the Alberta government just introduced something called the rate of last resort for consumers. Can you explain how that works?
Again, that is the new form of what was previously the RRO, the regulated rate option. The new name is rate of last resort.
Okay.
We are providing the ability for retailers, instead of just buying 3 months and it being more of a spot price, they can buy out to 2 years, really stabilizing their what they're purchasing, and then providing to their customers a stable long-term rate. We're going through the final negotiations right now to provide that. We are anticipating that early in the new year that'll be a rate able for anyone who hasn't gone out and found a competitive retail rate. It's kind of the default. So when you move to Alberta and you just need electricity right away, that's what the rate you're put on. But you have the option to go out to a competitive retailer if you're choosing and find the rates that suits you best. We're doing this for everyone across Alberta so they can get a stable, reliable source of electricity if they haven't either qualified for credit or if they haven't had a chance to look at the competitive market.
So how much of an increase has Alberta seen in more electricity production coming on stream?
We've seen a tremendous amount this last year, over 6,000 megawatts by the end of this year from last year. So people remember maybe January 13th or some other challenges this spring. We've had over 3,000 megawatts of dispatchable natural gas generation come online, and many more wind and solar projects come online as well. This will provide more stability, a more balanced and broad-based generation supply. We continue to do work on that, and many more thousands are being constructed right now, including some battery storage, which helps stabilize some of that fast frequency response. I'm getting a bit technical, but our system is becoming more and more balanced with more and more stable pricing, and that's a good end result for consumers.
So Nathan, in the grand scheme of things, let's talk about green energy projects such as wind and solar. What percentage do they actually contribute to the overall electricity grid?
Well, due to their intermittent nature, it can really be dependent on the weather. We've seen a huge amount being built. This summer, we've probably had the most contributions ever in Alberta's history of wind and solar, and that's what's partially responsible for driving those prices down. Now we're moving towards a firming or a stabilizing of that supply, so it's not so intermittent based on the weather. Whether that means they have a contract with a peaker plant that provides generation with natural gas, or whether they provide it through an energy storage, either electric battery storage or hydro battery storage to stabilize that. We're seeing that firming capacity come online as well, which overall provides a stabilizing of our structure and pricing and a more reliable provision of it to the grid and the market. These are all good outcomes for consumers.
What about nuclear energy and the potential of building some of these modular reactors to really help offset the grid?
We continue to pursue that. We are in the middle of developing a regulatory framework so we could have them here. We've never had that before, but we watch the market globally. There are a lot of cost concerns with nuclear, as well as what do you do with the fuel once it's spent. We are working on a regulatory framework to answer all of those questions. And then it becomes about timing and implementation within our market. What makes the most sense for Alberta and where? People need to remember as well that we are an energy-only market and a free market. That means generators pay for that investment cost, not ratepayers. Ratepayers pay for the product, and they only pay for the energy that's provided. We're trying to make sure that we retain those values so that we provide the best, lowest cost, cleanest electricity to those ratepayers, and they have choice. So nuclear is definitely a part of the future of Alberta. We continue to take steps toward that, but we don't want to rush it. When you rush into things, you end up paying more, and we continue to develop our framework to make sure that it is safe, secure, and as low cost as possible.
Okay, winter's just around the corner. It's going to get a lot colder here. What's the outlook looking like right now for reliable electricity and our grid so we don't have to borrow from Saskatchewan or Montana?
We're looking very, very good. We have over 13,000 megawatts of dispatchable generation on our grid right now. And our peak usage last winter, this summer, was 12,500. That gives us a lot of stability that no matter what's happening with our renewables, whether it's sunny or windy, we still have dispatchable generation on hand. And that's a really great place to be heading into winter. That's something that we didn't have heading into winter last year. So we're strengthening our grid, and we're realizing that potential. We're really excited about the future heading into next year.
Good stuff. Nathan Neudorf is Alberta's Minister of Affordability and Utilities. Thanks so much for joining us today from Calgary.
You bet. Thanks a lot, Hal. Really appreciate the time with you.
Well, many people see faith and science as two distinct subjects that can never work hand in hand because they're so different in nature. But is that actually the case? Today's guest sees things a bit differently. Joining us from sunny Southern California is Dr. Jeff Zweerink. He is an astrophysicist and a senior research scholar with reason to believe, an organization that combines science and faith. And he's also the author of several books, including Escaping the Beginning, Confronting Challenges to the Universe's Origin. Welcome back to BCN, Dr. Zweerink. Great to have you on again.
Hi, Janet. Really looking forward to our time today, and thanks for the invitation to be here.
Of course. Okay, so first of all, maybe tell us a little bit about reason to believe.
Well, reasons to believe is all about really our fundamental purpose is to reveal God in science. And that it kind of has two different functions, two different aspects. One is that many people think, both scientists and Christian alike, think that science and Christianity are at odds or at tension with one another. And that really just isn't the case. And two, as we study God's revelation and creation, we find a lot about him. So we're just looking to show what has scientific advance shown us about who God is, this incredible, awesome God that we get to worship.
Okay, so you recently wrote a blog about the perceived conflict between science and faith, but you don't think there is a conflict, do you? So the argument tends to go something like this: because science deals with reasons and facts, it can't be part of religion because it operates on feelings and beliefs. So how would you respond to that?
There's a lot of angles to that, but I think probably one of the most critical things to recognize in that discussion is that the way we've defined faith, or the way faith is used in that term, is that it's kind of a belief, a feeling, something you want to be true, whether it is. And historically, Christians have not thought about faith that way. Yes, we use the term faith. Faith is incredibly important. But faith, as a Christian, Christians have historically thought about that, is confident trust in a reliable source. So faith is not, well, let's just figure out something and try and believe that. Faith is, how do things actually work? What's really true? And can we believe that? And if you take that definition of faith, then faith is asking, the predicate of that is figuring out what are those reliable sources. Well, I think Scripture is an incredibly reliable source for telling who God is, who we are, and how we relate to one another. And I think science is an incredibly reliable source for figuring out how God has revealed himself in creation. So if we allow faith to be defined as kind of that feeling, I want to believe whatever I want, then yeah, they are in conflict. But if faith, as Christians have historically talked about it, as confident trust in a reliable source, science and Christianity are doing the same thing there. So they can't be in conflict.
Interesting. Okay. I guess another objection is that while Christians and other people of faith can be scientists, they must first check their religion at the lab door if they want to make any real progress. So how would you answer this objection?
Well, just historically speaking, that is not an accurate assessment. And there's numbers of lines of evidence you could marshal to show that that's not the case. Among other things, go back and look at kind of the who's who of early scientists. You got Galileo, you've got Isaac Newton, you've got Boyle, and all these people. These people were all devout Christians. In fact, the reason they were doing this study is that they wanted to understand how God had created the world. And so unless you're going to argue that, well, Christians kind of got it started, but now that science is working, it's no longer something that supports the Christian faith, then you really have a non-starter of an argument there. So just historically speaking, that has not been the case. But even today, you look at, there are surveys that have looked at people and their beliefs, scientists and their beliefs over the 100 years ago and today, and there are these surveys of kind of surveying belief: is there supernatural, is there not, those sorts of things. And even over the last 100 years, where you could argue, okay, this is the latest scientific, the cutting edge of where we are. In all of that time, the fraction of people who believe in a supernatural, who believe in Christianity, has largely remained unchanged in the biological sciences, the chemistry, physics, mathematics. They're all kind of largely the same. So that's just another place where the data doesn't support the idea that to be a Christian, you have to check your beliefs. And then the last thing I would comment is, when I go in to do, I don't know that I go in to do science work. I just think like a scientist kind of all the time. But when I'm at my job doing the science, if you will, I'm going in and thinking, okay, when I go into the lab today, things are going to behave the same yesterday as they did today. And what I find today is going to align with, and there ought to be an explanation that's consistent across there. And this explanation ought to account for this other data. These are actually beliefs that I've derived from who I think God is. And so when I go into the lab, it's an extension of my Christian faith, not something I have to do in contradiction to my Christian faith. So there's just a whole lot. I know there's that popular idea, but again, when you just go in and investigate it, it really doesn't pan out. The evidence doesn't support that idea.
Okay, well, I'm no scientist, but if I understand science correctly, a scientific study should include every single possibility as a potential answer. So I guess in other words, you can't exclude a possible answer because you don't like it. So are most of today's scientists guilty of that by excluding the possibility of a divine creator who exists outside of space and time?
That's kind of a complicated question to answer, but because there's a mix of two things at least that I see going on there. One is that very clearly there are scientists who are antagonistic to the Christian faith, and they will, some of them are very vocal. Some of them are, they will marshal arguments to make that's the case, that, oh, God just shouldn't belong here. We're about doing that. There's also another component, though, is that by and large, what we're doing when we're doing science is we're saying, okay, these are the phenomena that we see. What are the quote unquote natural explanations for that? So as a physicist, when I'm looking for a good explanation, it ought to be based in what I know to be true from physics, that there's gravity, electromagnetism, strong and weak nuclear force. There are these conservation laws. So when I'm looking for an explanation, I'm looking for an explanation that fits within that realm. Now, I was just reading this morning. I happened to be reading in John, I think it's John 6, where Jesus was walking across the water. His disciples had gotten into the boat, sailed across the water for a little while. Storm came up. He was walking across the water. Scientifically, how would I go about studying that? Well, I could see it with my own eyes. But then if I went back and said, all right, what about the water allows this to happen? Or was there something on Jesus? You're going to find out that that's really hard to study scientifically because it's not reproducible. It's not something I can replicate in the lab. It's miraculous. So if God was coming in and just miraculously doing things all the time, how would we ever get a good understanding of things? Again, I'll go back to what as I've read scripture, what I see about God is that he is a reliable, trustworthy, consistent, orderly God. Well, if he's created the world that way, I would expect the world to behave in ways that I could quantify by quote unquote natural laws. So most scientists, when they're going in, what they're saying is, okay, there's this arena we're going to play in where we're going to say, let's look for natural explanations for natural phenomena that we can test and determine what there is there. I think that's a great way to approach things. The problem, or where that runs into an issue, is when you say this is the only way to know things. If you say, all right, science is the only way to know things, it's a great way to know certain things, but it's not the only way we can know what's there. And so for an example, I would say, well, if you wanted to study Jeff Zwerig scientifically, you could learn about how tall I am, how many fingers I have, how long I've been alive, how my body works, how I think about certain things. You could do all that, but you still wouldn't have a relationship with me. And ultimately, Christianity is about who is God, who are we, and how do we relate to him? And so I think science is a great tool for understanding God's revelation and what it tells us about him. But science may not be the best tool to actually engage in that relationship with him. That's not the only way we get to know things.
Yeah.
So I think there are a lot of scientists who see that, and then there are some who say, I just don't want to look at things that way.
Yeah. Does the Bible contain any information that has given Christian scientists direction to discover some scientific truths?
Absolutely. Again, I think when you look through the history, a lot of those early scientists were operating under the assumption that the world was orderly and regular, and we ought to be able to discern these patterns, and there's a structure and a purpose to things. But I can think of one specific example where that is played out. And if you go back to the early 1900s, in fact, you go earlier than that, and scientists thought space and time were just these absolute quantities that matter moved around in. Well, you come early 1900s, and Einstein developed his theories of relativity. Now we think, okay, he's just this scientist sitting, his patent clerk, and he develops these ideas. But the idea he actually had that led to general relativity was the idea that the laws of physics ought to be the same everywhere in the universe, no matter how you're moving. And that's that's a philosophical, and I would even argue a Christian religious idea. Because if Greek mythology is correct, we wouldn't expect the laws of physics to look the same everywhere. If Hinduism is correct, we wouldn't expect the laws of physics to look the same everywhere. But if God is the creator of all things, we would expect the laws of physics to look the same everywhere. So that's where he developed his theories of relativity, or the seed that led to the development of them. But as Georges Lemaitre was looking at Einstein's equations of general relativity, he actually came up with this biblical notion that there's a beginning, that there's a created order, that there's a purpose. And he actually developed the Big Bang models, which most scientists think are the correct description of the universe. Now, this is a Belgian priest coming at it with his ideas about who God is, looking at general relativity and saying, oh, these are the explanations that would fit with Christianity. And lo and behold, those are the ones that end up working. So yeah, very much. I don't think there are places where somebody looks at a verse and says, oh, I'm going to go out and find that scientifically. But when we look at what Scripture has to say, that does inform as scientists how we look at things and what we're going to be looking for. We expect to find a beginning. We expect to find order. We expect to find purpose. We expect to find consistency. Lo and behold, that's what we find when we look at the creation.
Yeah. You mentioned beginning there. So do scientists believe or agree that the universe had a beginning, or do they believe it existed forever?
Yes. Some do, some don't. What's interesting, and go back to the start of the 1900s, Einstein introduces his general relativity. Lemaitre puts forth Big Bang models. His work with Slipher eventually, and Hubble come up with this idea that the universe is expanding. Well, the moment you have an expanding universe governed by constant laws, that points to a beginning. And so I think you can make a strong argument that history of the 20th century and into the 21st century has been an exercise in scientists looking and saying, this is what we know. How do we develop models that don't have a beginning? Maybe the universe is oscillating. It grows and it collapses and then it regrows again. Or maybe it's always growing, but new matter is being created. Or maybe it's growing and there's a multiverse. All of these have been ideas that scientists have put forth that says, here's a way of looking at the universe that doesn't have a beginning. And what's interesting, to the extent we can measure it, and there's still things to measure in there, but to the extent we can measure and understand, the universe seems to keep pushing us back to solutions or models where the universe has a beginning. And so I think it's not that it's like if you're a scientist, you have to believe there's a beginning, but there's a whole lot of evidence pointing to our universe having a beginning.
I guess one of the biggest criticisms also of the Bible is that it says that the earth was created in 6 days. So most scientists believe the universe is about 14 billion years old. And this has also caused conflict, I guess, within the overall church, with many believing in that literal 6-day creation, while others like yourself believe that it's scriptural to believe in an old earth creation. So what do you mean by that?
So this was actually one of the first real places where I'm wrestling with, okay, what does Scripture say and what does creation say? What does science say? And this is the first place where I'm like, okay, they don't quite line up. How do I deal with it? And so this is kind of when I was in college, I started wrestling with this idea. And in large part because I come with an approach that what Scripture has to say is the final authority on what it has to say. It is holds Scripture in high regard. It carries great authority. In fact, ultimate authority in what it says. And so as I'm reading through my Bible, there in Genesis, it says, these days have to be 24-hour days. And so lacking any more knowledge in that, I said, all right, if that's what Scripture demands, that's where I live. But at the same time, I'm taking my physics classes. I've done enough reading to know that science is indicating the universe and the earth is much older than that. So I was just kind of wrestling with that idea. And ultimately what I found, I said, all right, what does the science have to say? I investigated that some, and that seemed pretty solid. But I also then asked the question, okay, what does Christianity say about this? And what I found was that throughout history, Christians have been either ambiguous or divided on this issue. That there is, if you take Christians who hold Scripture in high regard and then ask them the question, what is the proper way to interpret those days in Genesis? what you're going to find is people say, well, given that Scripture is the supreme authority, it could be those are 24-hour days. Or it might be that those are much longer periods of time, kind of a day-age type view. Or it may be that those days are an analogy to our work week. So they're like our days and unlike our days. Or it could be they're just a theological structure not meant to give chronology, but meant to teach theological things about who God is. And what I recognized is that Christians have thought a lot about this, and the only way that's a conflict is if you say Scripture demands these are 24-hour days. There are many Bible-believing Christians who know how to study Greek, know how to study Hebrew, do good hermeneutics, hold Scripture in high regard, and many of them say, no, this is not the proper way to look at that. And honestly, when you look, again, you just look through history, and there are many Christians who, by their testimony and by their witness, would say, yes, there are men and women of God who want to serve and follow him, who come down with the position that those are much longer periods of time. So it really, it seems like it's a conflict that has to be there, but it's only a conflict if you mandate this particular reading of Scripture that all of Christianity doesn't agree on.
Yeah.
And that has provided great freedom for me in approaching Scripture.
That's amazing. And I know that was a huge question to throw at you right at the end there when we're getting out of time here. But Jeff, thanks so much for answering that and for being with us today. Great to have you on.
Thank you. Enjoyed the opportunity to have a conversation with you.
Amazing. Dr. Jeff Zwerwink is an astrophysicist and a senior research scholar with reasons to believe. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.